Hey, it's Rachel. I know I have not posted in a while. That is because there is almost nothing planted in the garden. I do have a ton of transplants ready to go out, but I also have a rabbit problem. The one bed that I did have planted and was harvesting out of was eaten to the ground, and until I resolve that problem, I'm not going to put anything else out here because it will just suffer the same fate. But in the interim, I did build the trellis behind me, and I wanted to share the design for this because it is very different than the trellises that I've built in the past. I've done a couple videos before on cattle panel trellises and how I've used them. This one is different because it is portable. This garden is much larger than my prior garden, and while before I could rely on a fairly simple rotation plan and a big mix of plant families to keep everything balanced, in this garden I need to rotate things very, very intentionally. I'm following a 10-year rotation, and that rotation only has one bed that requires a trellis. It just doesn't make sense for me to build a trellis on every single bed and leave it there the way that I did in my prior garden, because it's not going to get enough use most of the time and it'll just get in the way. Let me quickly go through the basics of this particular design, how it works, and the way I'm going to move it later. I was able to use 5 16-foot long panels that are curved over. Each of those is 50 inches or just a little over 4 feet wide. The trick to this whole design are these chains. I took the 16-foot panels and curved them around, basically bending them in half gently. And I have a chain at the bottom holding those corners together. That's true at this edge and at the other end of the 50-inch panel. A little more than halfway up, I added additional chains spanning across, essentially pinching the arch together and holding it in place. The panels want to spread outward and the chains hold them together at the bottom and at the midpoint. In totality, all of those forces together result in a nice stable structure that is self-supporting. Worth noting, I don't walk in here, so I will grow things up this side of the trellis and access them from outside. I will grow things up this surface of the trellis and access them from that central pathway, but I do not walk on the growing area, and hence these chains at chest height are not going to be in my way. This, by the way, is not expensive chain. I think it was the least expensive chain by the foot that I could find at Home Depot. It's not going to carry any direct weight bearing down on it. It just needs to resist the spreading force. Once this is covered with things like tomatoes and beans, it becomes fairly opaque and a strong wind could blow it over. I went ahead and put rebar in the ground just inside these CMU blocks, one at each corner of the panels, and I did the same along the walkway. Those are 2-foot rebars, and I've hammered them about a foot into the ground, leaving about a foot above. I've then taken zip ties, and I've zip tied off at the base of the rebar and then again towards the top. Pretty sturdy, pretty stable, and when I want to move this trellis later, all I have to do is snip off those rebars and then pick the whole thing up and move it. You can probably tell that once these rebars are in place, this chain really isn't in tension anymore, and theoretically you don't even need it. But when I go to move this whole thing next year, that chain will snap back into tension and hold the whole thing together and make it much easier to move to its new location. Last couple of details to note. You can share a rebar. The ones at the end are only holding that panel, but then the next one down is zip tied not just to this panel, but also to this one. That helps the whole thing act as a single unit. I've also zip tied the 2 panels together here where their cross chains come in to really lock the whole thing together into an assembly, and I've done the same thing on the opposite side. Next year, when this trellis needs to go to another bed, I will cut the zip ties, pick these things up, and carry them to their new location. The rebars over there I can leave in place. They're not in the way, they're not a tripping hazard. I will, however, likely remove the rebar here along the pathway because it will become a tripping hazard later when this trellis is removed. It's something you can do with one person, it's easier with 2. But either way, it's quick and it's simple. I think I got this whole thing set up in a single afternoon for this particular bed. Next year, I'll already have the panels curved, shaped, and ready to go, and I'll simply need to zip tie them to the rebar. I imagine I can get this whole thing in place next year in probably 15 minutes or less. That's it, quick one. I hope this design is helpful to other people that are looking for an inexpensive but strong and movable cattle panel trellis option. If you do try this, let me know how it works out for you, or if you have another design that you think could achieve the same purpose, please share. Until next time, when I finally get the garden planted, thanks.